All right, you're on. Call the meeting to order.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. The usual housekeeping items with the exits and the restroom. Doing a carpool, and I don't know if anybody else will join us tonight or not. Is there anybody in on Zoom in? Okay. Both Anthony and Steve Chitterer are working tonight, and both said unless they were on call, they would Zoom in. So if you would let us know if they or anyone is Zoomed in. And Karen Jenkins is out of town today, so she's not with us tonight at all. On Zoom or in person. Meeting minutes from October 12th. Does anybody have any alterations, additions, corrections? Okay, then the minutes of October 12th will be accepted as presented. And Katrina Allen is with us tonight. Bonnie has taken an evening away from us. I don't know how she can do that. So Katrina and Bonnie may share from time to time, as they already have done. But thank you, Katrina, for being with us. In terms of committee organization, number 6 on the agenda, the open meetings law again requires that all materials that we are reviewing at our meeting be posted 24 hours ahead of time. And I do apologize that the first email to you resulted in a second email to you with a correction to a few documents, some updates that had come in, and I wanted to make sure that they were there before we took a look at them, or I talked to you about something that wasn't in print in front of you. So that's the reason for that change. Also, if any of you want a 3-hole punch anything tonight, the 3-hole punch is here on the table. I will tell you that documents that are in final form and do not say draft are complete, as it would be in the report, because we are satisfied across the governance structures and the committee and the work that we're doing that those documents are in their final form. Specifically, you will see the grants listed for the Mendon Fire Department District and the Honey Falls Fire Department Village. So those two are punched. Anything else you want, you can punch here. Otherwise, anything that is draft in terms of the financial work is probably going to change again as more information comes in. So until you see something that I present to you punched, you know it's not in its final form. Communication. I met Monday with the fire department representatives to review some of the documents that we've been hoping to summarize. They are works in progress. There's a lot of data with the fire department, so the representatives are working to summarize it and also to summarize it between the departments in a way that's compatible, so that when you look at a page for Mendon and you look at a page for Honey Falls, even though the information on the page about the fleet might be different, it's presented in the same format, so that you have, you learn to read it. You've learned both format, you've learned the format for both products. Also, we're looking at graphic representation that's appropriate to take the data and put it in a visual format that makes the most sense, and then also to clarify any narrative aspects that I may need to write it for you. Any questions so far? Stephen, Anthony? Okay, Anthony and Steve Chitterer, good evening. Anthony, are you there? Steve Schitterer, are you there? What can you tell me, Dan? Anthony, are you there? Steve, are you there?
He says he has no mic tonight.
Can he hear us?
Can you hear us? You should be able to type in the chat box. You can hear.
Okay, what about
They
Steve?
can both hear.
Okay. All right, if you have anything that you want to contribute, please put it in the chat box and Danny can let us know that you're wishing to speak. All right, item number 7, committee charge. Under the first task, just to reiterate, progress with the fire department information and works are in progress. Under current capacities there with the status, the focus of tonight's meeting is within chapter 5, a portion of it. Chapter 5 is the financial piece, and that's where the focus will be tonight. Before we start on that, I want to jump down into task number 2, just to tell you that the tables for the target features and the natural features are in progress. We're working on those in addition to the fire information, and there will be more on that to follow. But I put the other things aside for tonight to focus on the finances. So welcome, Jackie. Thank you. Nope, no problem. The meat of what we're doing tonight is task number 1 under current capacities, and it's focused strictly on finances. There may be other questions that you have that aren't specifically related to the finances, but are involved in the financial picture as we go through it. So I don't know how you want to do this. Some of the questions you have may be answered as we go along. So that's up to you. If you have a burning issue on your mind and we're on that subject, ask it. If you think you want to wait to the end to see if it's answered, you do that. That's up to you. I'm going to ask you to take a look at the staple piece there called the portion of chapter 5, and that will guide us through these attachments. Now, the intention of the report is to have the graphic information presented in the body of the document. So the graphics that we're going to look at tonight will be translated into a figure number for appearance within the chapter. Because of the size of these tables and charts, they probably will not be inserted into the printed form here. They probably will follow the written narrative in the order they are presented. And I would ask you, as we go through this, I'm going to give you a number to put on each document we look at, because some of them we're going to go back to as we go through this, and I want you to be able to find them easily. So the first piece of this chapter 5 deals with assessment. And I think we've talked about assessments before. You all have a basic understanding that property assessment drives the levy based on the budget. So the paragraphs here before the bullets just indicate that the municipal budget and the assessments are the factor that drive the rate per thousand of assessed value that generates a property owner's tax bill for that year. That second paragraph, a little bit more here. The property tax levy is calculated at a rate per thousand, determined by dividing the budget by the total taxable assessed value. That's done every year. So the roll closes July 1st. The assessor closes the tax roll July 1st of each year. And then that is the total value upon which the property tax is based. if you look at the first bullet, it corresponds with the first graphic, which is the Mendon Fire Department budget. This is the first page. A couple things to take note of here. Procedurally, the calendar requirements for assessment drive the timetable for the Mendon Fire District to submit its budget. If we look at this first page, you'll see that there are appropriations of $621,865. Not all of that every year is going to be on property tax driven. Because as you see, the second line there are estimated revenues of $23,810. So that is subtracted because that does not need to be raised by the levy. You ultimately see at the bottom that the tax apportionment is $598,055. That's what will be used to drive the rate per thousand, is that the town goes ahead and levies the tax on behalf of the district. Right, please label this sheet number, just put a 1 someplace. Now, in the village, things are a little different for the village taxpayers and the fire protection district taxpayers. The second bullet there, the village proposes its annual fire contract to the town for the Mendon Fire Protection District. When the town authorizes the contract, meaning the amount of the contract, the assessor then calculates the rate per thousand on the taxable value within the fire protection district. And like the fire district levy, the fire protection district levy shows up on the tax bill for someone who lives in the fire protection district. Is that clear? Do you follow that? So both the town and village tax levies are guaranteed by Monroe County, meaning that neither municipality collects back taxes, nor are they responsible for the procedural process associated with the collections. The county guarantees payment on both municipal tax warrants. So if the village and the town both levied $1 million and several people didn't pay their property tax, the county is going to make that whole for both municipalities. They're not going to suffer the loss. They're not going to be late on collection. Okay. If we move on to the bottom paragraph here, the real property tax exemptions in the town of Mendon are established by New York State. They're authorized, and then they are agreed to or assumed by the town and the village through local laws. So I'm going to just show you something here. If you look over, these are the local laws in the town of Mendon that deal with property tax exemptions. There are several pages of them. They are online if you want to look at them ahead of when they will appear in the document as an appendix. They are chapter 230 in the town of Mendon Code, and it's titled under taxation, and each exemption has its own section. If you go to your next piece of information, it should say Town of Mendon 2022 budget exemption. Please label that item 2. And this is a list of authorized exemptions within the town of Mendon. And you will find them within these local laws. The local laws that I'm just showing you here in print tonight are going to be put where that says appendix with a blank. All right, so the allowable exemptions are enumerated in figure, made it 2 for the town of Mendon. And then figure 3, if you take the next page, which is the village exemption, and put a 3 on that page, these are the town and village exemptions according to their local laws. Now, some of these exemptions are partial, like the first responder exemption that most of you are familiar with. Some of you are familiar with the veterans exemption, the STAR exemption. However, there are some parcels of property that are wholly exempt. They don't pay any property taxes. If you go to the next sheet, it says wholly exempted assessed value for the town and the village. The last row is for the year 2022. In the town of Mendon, there are 2,756 taxable parcels. There are 69 that are wholly exempt. If you go back to the number 2 and 3 that we made, and you look, a big one on the town budget and the village budget is the schools. They're wholly exempt, as are the county-owned property, the town-owned property, the village-owned property, churches. So some of these on the list are wholly exempt. Those are the ones that are represented on what you should just have number 4 on. If you keep going to the right on this chart, you'll see that the Mendon Fire District has this number of taxable parcels. The Fire Protection District has that number of taxable parcels. And if you go back to the total parcels wholly exempt, then you'll see how many of those come away. If you go over to the village side on the very right, you'll see there are 954 taxable parcels in 2022. 53 are wholly exempt. And you can see the total exempt value for both those in the town of Mendon and those within the village. Even though there's one assessor, that the village and the town have combined to one assessing unit, there still are separate assessments because the village is a separate governing jurisdiction. It taxes for its village services, just like the town taxes for its town-wide services. Okay. Do you have any questions for me? I'm going to tell you right now, if you try to add the total parcels in the Mendon Fire District and the Fire Protection District, you may not get the total taxable parcels on the first left-hand column. I don't know why. That's a mystery to me. It might be in the reporting mechanisms that the town has, but on the bottom of page 4, you'll see where I drew the information from. And these reports are available if you want to look at them. But these are the numbers that came from those reports. The columns for the Mendon Fire District parcels and the Fire Protection District parcels are in the second source prior year file special district summary. Other than that, the town of Mendon and the village of Honey Island Falls, those same 3 columns for each municipality came on July 18th and updated For some I did not have yet, October 21st. So whether the discrepancy in this parcel number comes from the way those reports are generated, I don't know. For our purposes, I think we get a clear picture here. You can see that the number of wholly exempt parcels has gone up. Fluctuates a little bit more in the village than it does in the town. Okay. All right. Do you have any questions on exemptions? Okay. Then let's go to the bottom of page 1 on the narrative for the fire protection budget. Right. Revenue source estimates support the appropriations. And in these budgets, we're talking here for the town, the village, and the fire district, there has to be a balance. You cannot appropriate more money on a budget document than you can show you have revenues support. When it's not like the state, it's not like the federal government, okay? You have to show a balanced budget. So where you saw on the district budget that they used some revenues that they had coming in to offset the levy, those are the things that are going to help sustain the appropriation side, the spending side. On the spending side, the estimates that are in the budget are for contractual and personnel expenses in the fiscal year. We're just talking one fiscal year for each budget. So if you turn the page to page 2, the town and the fire district are on the same fiscal year. They are on the calendar year. So their fiscal year is January 1 to December 31st of every year. The village is on a different fiscal year. Their fiscal year is June 1st to May 31st. So they both are 12 months. They just are on different calendar timelines. The assessor's work is done and falls into line with these fiscal years for various things that are required by both municipalities. So just because there are different fiscal years shouldn't indicate to you that there's a variation in what's going on with assessed value in exemptions. The exemptions are done in sometimes different time frames. Some are done by March 1st, others are done by different dates. But everything is done on a defined, definitive calendar to tie back to municipal budgeting, assessment, and tax levy and tax bill for the property taxpayers. Okay. So the annual budgets are presented and they proceed to adoption according to legal procedures and calendar requirements. Property tax levies on residents in the fire district and the fire protection district in the village are noted on the next figures, which are stapled together. And I would ask that you number the first one, which is the Mendon Fire District, with a 5. The next sheet is the Fire Protection District. If you would please put a 6 on that. And then the last one is the village. You would put a 7 on that one. Okay, so before we take a look at these, let's go to the next paragraph where the cost considerations, the appropriation for fire service are going to consider, among other things, administrative costs, equipment, staffing, property, and building maintenance. So each governing authority, these 3 entities have autonomy and control of their budget within the state's legal parameters. For example, there are constitutional tax limitations. There are debt limitations. And then there's the 2% property tax cap that was inaugurated by the state under the Cuomo administration several years ago. So it's not like a taxing jurisdiction can say, oh, here's our budget, here's how much money we're gonna levy this year. It's all done within the confines of some form of regulation and compliance. So the first one we're gonna look at is the Mendon Fire District. And I would just say to you, this is very clean from the standpoint of fiscal year, coincides with calendar year, coincides with the town fiscal year. The town levies the tax and collects it for the fire district. So everything with the district and the town of Mendon in terms of financial work that they must do together is on the same page with assessment, tax payment, tax billing, all of that. When the district goes out and does their public hearing on their budget, it's done on the calendar, just like the town budget is put out to public hearing and goes through its preliminary stage and final format, and then ultimately for the levy purpose. So let's take a look at this one. Each of these pages in this stapled packet, let me just verify, but I think they're all starting with the year 2000. Yes. And they go down the page to the current year of 2022. So you will see the taxable assessment, which for the district total is $522,184,045. The levied amount, if you go back to your, well, we'll do that a little later. Okay. You see the levy amount, and then that's going to drive the rate per thousand. So when the district says to the town, here's our budget, $598,055, and it's calculated for a rate per thousand. This year that we're in right now, this fiscal year, the rate for the district is $1 and I will say 15 cents. Okay, because the 5 would kick up the 2, for 2 decimal points. Okay, so if you look up the column for the rate per thousand, my computer didn't want to acknowledge the 0 that I put on the end of a couple of those. That's why there's only a total of 4 digits instead of 5. But in the absence of that 4th decimal point, that is a 0. You can see in the year 2001, the district had to use $1,800 from its fund balance in addition to the levy. And does the supervisor know why? I think we talked about this, but I think it was that when the district sent the budget, they were over their constitutional tax limit. And so they, in order to keep the budget, they had to use that fund balance, something like that. So I just want you to know, things happen, things come up, but there are checks and balances, and this is an indication of one of those at work. Not that it's a traumatic experience. I don't mean to say that, but when you're using figures and math, there's human error even with calculators and stuff. So this is not a real problem. Okay, now let's go to the next page, which you should have is labeled number 6. And before we start to look at this page, the same thing that happens to get the district rate per thousand happens with the assessor for the fire protection district rate per thousand. The town supplies the assessor with the amount they've agreed to for the contract. The assessor takes that, divides it into the assessed value, taxable assessed value for the protection district to get the rate per thousand. So where you see the red asterisk on the very right column under the rate per thousand, what we're showing you here is the rate per thousand that the assessor and the tax people calculated. When the village calculates its rate per thousand, it's not always the same as when the assessor applies it to the value in the town for those parcels in the protection district. Don't mean to complicate it for you. I just want you to know that. It could be off a percent of, like the bottom one at 2022 could be 0.6361 or 62 or 59. I mean, we're not talking big variations here. I don't want to mislead you into, we're not on the same page. It's just when we look at documents that we're going to see, you are going to see some variation from the contract documents to this document. So these figures that you're looking at on this piece you labeled with a 6 comes from town budget, right at the top. Just preceding the first entry of the row for figures, it says from the town budget. Because this is what actually was levied and the rate per thousand that drove that levy. You'll see there's asterisks as well, because there were different taxable assessments. Again, we're not talking wide variations. We're talking $5, $6, $100 maybe, not enough to make a significant difference in what we're doing here. So please don't look at this and think that, somebody's not being honest back and forth. That's not the picture. All right, there's 2 asterisks in the middle column for the levy in the year 2002. On the village contract documents, the village asked the town for $102,109. The town sent a check for $115,575. And that's what they used to make the levy. So I don't know why there was that kind of a difference. I just don't know. But I wanted to point that out for you.
John, you think we could get that to happen again?
Right, let's go to the next page. And this is for the village. Okay, so when the contract comes from the village to the town, there's some information that comes with it. And it displays how the village calculated the amount of the fire contract. The village has 2 fire contracts, one with the town of Mendon for Fire Protection District 1, and one with the town of West Bloomfield for a fire protection district, essentially in what we know as North Bloomfield Hamlet. So what we're showing here is just the village taxpayer portion that they pay. So when the contract is set forth and the calculation is done by the village, it determines what the fire protection district will pay in the town of Mendon, what the fire protection district will pay in the town of West Bloomfield, and what portion of that fire protection overall budget in the village is going to be paid by the village taxpayers. It's done in a way that uses the equalization rate so that the cost per thousand is equal across the 3 pots of money coming. Doesn't mean the rate per thousand is the same. It just means that dollar per dollar if you pay your tax bill from North Bloomfield, or you pay it as a village resident, or you pay it as a Mendon resident, you're paying the same value per dollar in each of those areas. So when you looked at the fire protection district and you saw the levy for 2022 at back there, 0.6360, and you look here on the village sheet, 0.6359. This is what I mean. The equalization rate is the same for both the village and the town in this year. However, when the calculation was done, you know, it's a penny difference. But the assessor puts it for the town. So the assessor's rate per thousand can be a little bit different than the village calculation sheet. So I want you to see, you know, we're not talking mega dollars here. Okay. Do you have any questions right now? Anybody? All right, and I will leave you with one piece of information here. Would you please go back to the item number 5, the first page of the stapled piece? And look at the bottom row, 2022. The rate per thousand for the Mendon Fire District is, I'm going to call it $1.15 per thousand. And the supervisor has given me a page to show me that in 2022, outside the village, the rate per thousand for the town taxpayer was $2.39. So in rough figures, okay, the town is paying $2.40 a thousand. The Mendon Fire District on top of that pays $1.15 per thousand. So the Mendon Fire District rate per thousand is roughly half of what the town is levying for its total services in the town outside the village. Now, keep in mind, some of those services relate to fire protection. You got the building inspector, the fire marshal, okay, the code enforcement officer. You've got the assessor making the levies, the town clerk, the legislative body who's generating the budget. So keeping in perspective that the role of fire protection for the municipality has some administrative aspects in it, aside from the functional applying of the fire department service, you know, we're not in a bad place. I mean, I don't think, maybe the supervisor has a different assessment of this, but I don't believe that people are complaining so much about taxes that's driven this as we are number of people available.
Most of the time when people complain, you know, they come in, Gina can attest to this, you know how much I pay in tax. I pay $50,000 a year, $20,000 a year. And there are people in the town who do pay that, but the amount of that $15,000 or $20,000 that is for fire protection or for village tax or for town tax is a fraction of that $15,000 or $20,000.
Leaving the other piece, which is the schools. Most
In
of
the
it
county.
in the county, yeah. Okay, all right. Right, let's keep going here.
I should also mention that,
Yep.
you know, when I talked to the assessor, you know, obviously some people are in water districts and obviously fire protection can be different costs, but I mean, in round figures, you know, it's about $36, $37 a thousand. If somebody comes into the town of Mendon and says to the assessor, what's it going to cost me in taxes? He's going to say, what's your assessment? Divide it by 1,000, multiply it times $37. That's in round figure. As you can see here from your numbers, presented as I said, a fraction of that $37 is for town, village, and fire protection.
Let's let's move on to indebtedness. Now, keep in mind, just like if you own a home and you have a mortgage and you pay principal and interest, indebtedness in a municipality is basically the same idea. You're going out and borrowing money. You're going to pay it back over a period of time. And each year, you will pay a principal amount in the interest, which like the hearing charges for that year, based on the interest rate at the time you take the loan. So if you would put a number 8 on your piece that says indebtedness, now, the Mendon Fire District does not carry any debt. So on your sheet now numbered 8, you will see that the indebtedness is only for the village and the town. And we're showing it for the town, even though the town debt is not for fire protection for a reason. Okay, but let's take a look here. The quoted village bond for fire equipment, which you see on this sheet is 2013 fire department, 500,000. That's a piece of apparatus. The loan amount was $500,000. The principal and interest payments total $720,190.97. What you see here on the paper that you have available shows you the interest and principal payment just for this particular village fiscal year. So there are 19 years to pay principal and interest to pay off the $500,000. This current fiscal year the village is in, 22-23, is payment number 10, and that's the amount that will be charged this year. It totals $37,556.25. At the end of the payment, the principal at $500,000, the total interest at $220,000. So that you have a frame of reference as to what we're talking about here. Now, I'm just going to show you how we know this. Just take a look here. This is the schedule of the payments, like you have an amortization schedule for a mortgage that shows you the year and how many payments you have and what you're paying in principal and interest. That's what this is, and this is for that loan. It's called a Dunbar report, and at the bottom it states that at the end of the loan, it would be $720,190.97. So when I looked at the village budget, there's no other debt service for the fire department. However, there is other debt service, so I put it on the chart. There's a dump truck, and there are 2 loans for the wastewater treatment plant. That's what WWTP, wastewater treatment plant digester, piece of functional equipment for the process, and then a New York State loan they took for the filter, which is another piece of a large piece of operating equipment at that facility. You will see that the budget lines affiliated with them, they are for the wastewater treatment plant, they are a GG number instead of an AA because the sewer department is an enterprise fund in the village. There is a separate revenue and appropriation section in the village budget for the sewer department. So for this year, you will see the principal and interest payment. There's no interest payment on the loan, leaving me to believe that it may be paid off this year, but I don't know that because I don't have access to this information for those. And I had emailed Jerry earlier and asked for that. So, yeah, so whenever it comes, you know, we'll continue on with filling in the blanks up here.
Okay, we don't have that sheet.
No,
Okay.
not yet,
No problem.
not yet, because those will appear in an appendix probably. Okay, so for this year, for this fiscal year, 2022 to 2023, the bottom right total in red, the 123,090.75, that is the total indebtedness for the village this fiscal year. If we go down to the town of Mendon, you will see that their total indebtedness for the general taxpayer now, not for water districts, because the loans for the water districts are paid by the people in the district, not by the general taxpayer. So this is the only debt the town carries for us as general taxpayers in the town of Mendon. And it totals this year $84,719. In the narrative, you'll see that that payment is on a loan of $1,350,000 for the library. And when this one is paid, it will have cost the town $2,052,726.56. So please understand the idea of bonding goes across multiple years. The number of years are dictated by state law, depending on what the object is or the improvement is. Buildings generally are longer terms than equipment, but there's a lifetime affiliated with each specific thing that's bonded. Okay, you'll see where this information came from for the town and the village. Do you have any questions on that?
At some point, will we see a budget for each of these entities? Because it's quite well done, Mendon Fire District, and you have no debt.
Yes, you will see the budget. Okay.
I have a quick
Anything?
question.
Yes.
So, the debt services for the dump truck, the digester and the filter, how does that relate to emergency services?
Because you're going to see when we look at the next piece of information, there's a maximum debt load that a municipality can incur. So what you have out in loans is subtracted from what your maximum debt can be. So when you now talk about doing other things in fire protection, and for example, the village has indicated it wants to build a firehouse. You're going to see on the next page what the total debt limit is that the village can carry. And then we have to subtract what it already has in load, which I don't know because I don't have the other pieces yet.
Mhm.
But all we know right now is what we have in total with that vehicle, Barton vehicle.
Okay.
Okay. That help?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, because it does affect the debt load, I guess,
Yeah.
then I understand that part of it. I just, when I read this, I was looking at it and going, what
Yeah.
does that have to do with putting a fire truck on it?
It affects the bottom line of what the village can borrow, or in the town
Okay.
case, what the town
All
can
right.
do, or in the fire district case. They don't have that right now, but you'll see they're included because they do have some debt limitations. Okay. Anything on this sheet that's up on the screen before we go on? All right. Okay, let's go to the next one. And if you would put a 9 on this one, it should be the draft maximum indebtedness at the top. Okay, now, there are going to be some concerns with this, and I understand, want to put a perspective on it. This is for our use only, so where you see in red at the bottom, this is for the committee purpose only. We're not actuaries, we're not CPAs, we're not credit evaluators. So what I've done is taken how to calculate the maximum debt load and put some figures in that we know to give you a rough idea based on the debt limitations, what kind of money is available for loan borrowing purposes. Okay, starting at the top here. It's the calculation to determine the maximum indebtedness comes from tax rolls. Now, we've been talking about taxable assessment. If you see that middle piece, it says total assessed value. The state law says that maximum indebtedness is calculated on the total assessed value of the municipality for the current year, which closed July 1 of 2022, and the previous 4 years. So the total assessed value for the town and the village were readily available from the assessor. Those are the figures that he gave me. When you look over at the Mendon Fire District, I don't have a total assessed value for the district. The assessor gave me the taxable assessment. Now, because the district doesn't have any debt, we're going to keep them in the calculation because they have some aspects of borrowing that the village and the town do not have, and I wanted to be able to point them out to you. But we're looking at a reasonable column here under Mendon Fire District. If the district's going to go out and borrow money, then again, the CPAs, the legal beagles, and the actuaries are going to tell them what they can borrow. Okay, so the average amount, let's go back to the left, go down the left hand. The average amount of those 5 assessments, as you run across, you get the average for the town, the village, and pretend fire district. The village and the town can borrow a maximum 7% of that average amount. So for the town, their total borrowing can carry 53 million plus there, okay? For the village, it's 12,769,000. Now again, this is not to be construed as a defined number or definite number. This is just for our purposes to demonstrate to you what goes on in the world of borrowing and how it works. You see that the Mendon Fire District cannot have a 7% maximum average. Let's go down one row, Danny. They can have a 3% maximum of the average. That's their limitation. If they want to, they can go to the state comptroller and ask for permission to go up to 5%. And if they did that, to the very right, that would be the number. And then the 3%, which they can do on their own, just like the town and the village can do on their own, would be that 15 million.
That's state law.
Yes. Yes. And if you want to know where it came from, look down below above the red print and it says sources. This comes out of the New York State Local Finance Law, Title 8. Those are the sections. And FASNY, which is the Fire Association for the state of New York, every year, every 2 years, puts out a book of the consolidated laws in the state that deal with fire protection and fire services. So those are the page numbers in the current edition of the FASNY document. It's just easier than trying to look it up online in a legal book.
So Bumpy, you'd subtract the 123,000 off the village's 12.7 million.
Well, let's go down. I'm going to work first with the town of Mendon because they only have one debt. You want a drink, Jerry? I'll give you some water. All right, now, again, this is just, for discussion purposes, because if the town is going to borrow more money, some of that 2,052,000 has already been paid. So the current debt load might be lower than that. Okay, I don't know exactly what year we're in with that library payment, but we're getting down close to the end.
Shelley, have a.
Yeah, I don't have the sheet yet. But that's what we're gonna take away for our purposes, so that you can see the maximum amount available for the town is gonna be that, maybe a little bit more depending on how much the current indebtedness is. So that's a ballpark. If we go over to the fire district, because they don't have any debt, they can borrow 3%, all resolution of the commission, that's what they could carry. Again, ballpark figure, not an exact number. If we go to the village, because we don't have the dump truck and the wastewater treatment pieces yet, I don't know how to get the current indebtedness. So when that goes in there, that will calculate underneath the value for the village. Does that make sense to you? Do you understand that I'm not trying to give you exact figures? I just want you to be familiar with the process and the kind of financial value that we have out in loans and what is available. Okay, all right, let's go on here. Now, in terms of revenue, when you saw the first page you put up and there was $23,000 there going against the levy for the fire district, revenue, other than the real property tax levy, across the district, the town, and the village can come from these kinds of sources. Not all of them are available to the fire district, but I put them all together in the paragraph so that you get an idea that not everything that these municipalities work with comes from a tax levy. In addition to those things listed in the paragraph, there are grant awards that have been made. Both Mendon Fire Department and District, Village Fire Department, and the Village of Honey Falls. And those are the next two pages. So the first one is monetary grant awards for the Mendon Fire District. If you would put a 10 on that. My understanding is there's nothing out there waiting for decision. So in terms of the Mendon Fire District, you don't see draft across this because this one is given to me as this is it for the report. So I hole punched it. All right, let's go to the next one. And Denise tripped me up here. She copied both sides and I put the wrong side first in the hole punch, but the first page is that it says 8/26/22 update. All right. This was a figure that was in the report that I had done for the town and village back in 2016. I left everything that was there, and if you flip the page over, you'll see that there are some updates. The updates are in red. Again, there's nothing out there that is pending, so I can, pretty it up in the report. It will be hole punch 6 times. So, but this is the grant revenue. It shows that there is an interest on the part of the fire departments and the taxing jurisdictions to offset the load for the taxpayers. It shows that people are willing to get involved, to write the grants, supervise the grants, and, play the role that the grant criteria dictates in terms of when to make the purchases, how to make the purchases, what is suitable. So it does take an effort. And I think when typically we see this when fire departments go out for fundraising. They will say that, you know, across this period of time, we've raised X amount of dollars in grants to help fund our services for your protection. So there's a value in having this in the report and sharing this with you. All right, now, the next one, if you would, please mark that as number 12. This is reserve funds. And each of the jurisdictions that we're talking about here, the district, the town, the village, can have reserve funds. You do not see the town represented here because the town does not have a direct responsibility for protective application. Reserve funds are specifically, they're titled for the specific purpose of each fund. It designates appropriations from the funds for expenditure in the annual budget. If the municipality is going to spend some money from the reserve fund, it says so in its annual budget. If it's going to transfer money into the reserve fund, it says so in its budget. So in terms of the fire protection district, there's nothing there because the town does not have a purpose to buy equipment or a tangible item for fire protection application.
Okay, I would just add that the town can't establish a reserve fund for a contract.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. All right, let's look at the village. Both balances for the village and the fire district are as of June 1st of 22. You'll see where the figures came from to us. Fire equipment for the village and radio and pager for the village. Down in the fire district, you'll see equipment refurbishment, building repair, and capital fund. Okay. These are the amounts given, so I can't dispute them. I put them in draft form because when we get to the report framework, that's 2023. Some of these may change a little bit. Any questions?
What is capital fund normally used for? Is there something specifically?
Purchase of like new apparatus, different large expenditures like that, I think would be the best.
Mostly equipment.
Yeah,
Generally.
generally buy a fire truck without taking a loan,
Sure.
save it up a little bit.
Okay, let's go to the next. All right, you'll see here in the next paragraph that there's a piece for the appendix, and that is the fire contract that comes from the village to the town every year. It's a multiple page document. Okay, this is the legalese that expresses what the village is providing in terms of fire service. It has to be signed by both boards. And in West Bloomfield, the same thing is done. It's signed by the town board there and the village board. It has to be notarized. The fire department has to agree to it. So the fire department secretary has to attest that a resolution has been passed by the fire department at a meeting with the meeting date that the department willingly accepts the responsibility contained in the contract for that service. The assessor provides the village the assessment for the areas within the contract service. And then it provides the village budget for operations. So if you looked at the village budget, you would see there's a fire department entry because it's the department of the village. And then you would see where there's intention to put money in the reserve fund. That's an add-on. The debt service is an add-on. So when you take the operations budget and you put these other expenditures on it, you come up with a better description of the cost of the village for fire protection. Now, the village fiscal year doesn't follow the town fiscal year. So this contract for 2022 actually works on the village budget from 21, 22.
Mhm.
So in addition to what is anticipated to go into reserve funds, what's going to principal and interest, the village has the opportunity to make whole on any of the expenditures for the fire department or any expenditure that they deem appropriate for their ability to provide fire protection. So where the village overspent the budget in 2021, it shows the town what those expenses were and how much they were. Where they go under budget, they credit that back to the town. Or they say to the town, with your permission, we'll put that into reserve funds. So unlike the fire district that says, here's our budget, we get the levy, that's it. The village goes back a fiscal year, considers everything that was spent, and goes from there to generate an amount for the next year's contract. So in essence, they become whole for their dollar amount affiliated with fire protection related to fire department services, fire department buildings, fire department equipment. There's a difference in how that is expressed for tax levy when we're working with the budget. And I don't mean to complicate it, but I just want you to know that there is a difference. So if you look at the last piece, which is a stapled piece, it says village fire contracts at the top. I'm going to ask you to label that with a 13. And I'd like you to turn the page to where the red is. Okay, so this is just straight up 2018, that's the total budget. That's not the village fire department operations section within the village budget under the fire department. That includes reserves, debt, insurance, everything. That's what the Mendon Fire Protection District had as their piece of it. That's the North Bloomfield Fire Protection District. That's the village share. Those are budget adjustments. And it says see note 2 below, this is what they said. This is why there were adjustments taking away some money. 2019, 20, 21, and 22 are there. Those are the last years that, you know, that maybe you just want to be concerned about those. The rest of it is there because this was a piece I had done again in that 16 report. And I wanted to update that for the town as well as give you information so that you can see, if you go back to the first page, you know, you can see what the cost is every year. And, you know, generally the cost goes up, sometimes it goes down, but generally it is trailing up. Okay, I know we're over. I can tell you, just a little aside, in last week's Sentinel, the supervisor in his column talked a little bit about the fiscal health of the town based on the state comptroller's scoring, and he listed it there. The same report is available for the village. The village results, where the town had 0, the village has 3.3. Where the town had 3.3, the village has 0. So they're both basically in a very good fiscal situation as far as the state comptroller is concerned. So if any of you had read that column and wondered about that, this is the report. We have it for both the town and the village. But again, you know, as it's stated in the column, it's a good solid financial picture. All right, any questions? All right, next time I hope to have the information from Jerry so that we can get that one document fully filled out. That will adjust the narrative on a piece of this. But otherwise, I'm going to ask you to review the narrative and the documents that were presented tonight, just to make sure that your familiarity with them is comfortable. And if you want them in the report, if they're expressed, how you want them expressed, so that we can get this piece, you know, in line for that portion of chapter 5. Sound like a plan?
Very good.
Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. Are there any questions from the Zoomers?
No question.
Okay. Okay. Last chance, anybody? All right, we'll see you November 9th. And then please know that after November 9th, there's a 3-week period to the next meeting. So that second meeting in November is probably going to be hit kind of hard with the fire department data. So, you know, we'll concentrate on that like we did on the finance. You come back with any question on finances next time, you know, all this is still available, so let us know. Thank you all.